Hey, what's up guys? I'm Evan, and today we're going to be sending Firebase cloud messages to our Android applications. Last time we set up Firebase in an ejected Expo kit application, and now we're going to be actually sending messages. The reason you would be doing this is, say you ejected your app, you needed some module that wasn't part of Expo, right? Then you're going to eject, and once you eject, you won't be able to use the built-in Expo notifications system anymore. So this is a really good alternative to that, and it's just an awesome messaging system. I love it. Right now we're just going to set up Android, and then I'm going to make another video doing iOS. The reason for that is because to do iOS,
you need to make an app in the iTunes App Store.
You need to make an app in iTunes Connect, and then you need to create the certificate for sending notifications and sync that with Firebase. It's a lot easier in Android, so we're going to do Android, and then on top of that we're only going to be doing messaging today, Firebase cloud messaging, and then I'll do notifications in another set of videos. Now again, before we get started, if you are someone who does not like to watch videos, especially mine, all you have to do is go to the NPM page, which I'll put up right here. Okay, go to this page and there's instructions. I'm mostly going to be following those off screen here and pretend like I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to code anything today just because
we have to use studio for this, and as a team, it takes so much memory that it will crash my screen cap. I know this because I was yesterday and crashed the screen cap.
Alright, so let's get right into it. What's the difference between Firebase cloud messaging and Firebase notifications, right? Because recently Firebase decided to divide the services up, right? So there's messaging, and then notifications sits on top of that. And the difference between the two is that messaging is messaging is like an application. Firebase cloud messaging, right? That is a library that you install onto your application. It has cross-platform APIs that allow you to send and receive messages. When you send, it uses protocols like HTTPs and XMPPs, and then when you receive messages, you can receive data messages or just straight push or remote notifications, right? So when you receive those notifications, those actually go to the notification library, and that's where you would handle and process those. And the reason for that is that there's just so many things you can do with notifications now that we need our own separate library for that. But you still have to install messaging before you can get that functionality for the notifications library. I hope that makes sense. So today what we'll be doing is we'll be installing Firebase cloud messaging on our ejected Expo Kit app, and then we'll be sending a data-only message to the server from our terminal, and then we'll receive that message on our application, and it'll do some magic thing. What will we be doing? Okay, we're going to need two libraries to make this work, right? We're not only going to need the Firebase Cloud Messaging library, but we're also going to need Firebase Instance ID. And what that does is it gets the ID token that you're going to need to actually send notifications to a particular device. And by notifications, I mean Firebase Cloud Messages. All right, so go ahead and pop open the project that we made in the last video. And again, the link to all this code will be in the description down below, so just go ahead and click on that, clone that if you want, so you don't have to go watch that video. So what we did last time, right, is we bring in the Firebase library by doing Firebase from Expo Firebase app, and then we want to import whichever libraries we're using, right? So last time we used these libraries, but this time we're going to be using messaging and instance ID. So we're going to go ahead and import those libraries. We also want to install them, so you'll install them using yarn add or npm install, right? So I'll go ahead and pop open a terminal with control and then the tilde button or backtick button, whatever you want to call it, and then just add these libraries to our project. So this is the root directory for our terminal. You go yarn add, then that library, Expo Firebase messaging, and then Expo Firebase instance ID. Once these libraries install, what this is going to do is it's going to bring in not only all that Node.js code that we need for React Native, but it's also going to have the iOS and Android code. So we're going to need to link that Android code to our Android Studio project. And the way to do this is, let's go ahead and save this JavaScript. We'll come back to this in a minute. All right, so in your ejected application or your React Native application, you're going to have an Android and iOS folder. We'll go ahead and open these up, and I'll just go ahead and show you what the written looks like. npm.js, Firebase messaging. All right, man, we're getting mad numbers lately. Just, ooh. Here's the installation guide I was telling you guys about. It's very well put together. So for Android, right, what we're going to do is we need to open up this file and add these lines and then just make sure that these are in there. Same with build.gradle, and then we'll add something extra to the manifest. Now this is kind of unique to this library, and then as standard with any unimodule, we'll also add it to the main activity. I'll get into why we add it to these files here in a second when we do it. So let's go to the first one, right, which is Android settings.gradle. And then come back over here and then just follow the path. I was going to put it in the terminal, but I decided against it. So Android settings.gradle. And then right here at the bottom, you see I already have these added, but in the last tutorial we included Expo core. You always need that for any kind of unimodule that you want to include. And then Firebase app, you're going to need this one as the core module for any Firebase module that you want. And then it's the same kind of template for each one of these. We're just going to reference where the Android code is, which is always in the same place, right? Node modules, then the name of the library /Android. So you can go ahead and copy these blocks down 2 more times and add messaging and instance ID so that we can link these 2 extra libraries. And when we link these in the settings, then it means that our app knows that these are available to link. There's a couple of layers of linking, but basically the settings allows you to link it so that Android knows where to find the code, and then we're going to link it so that Expo knows where to find the code. So after we've linked it in our settings, then we want to go into our app and then our build.gradle. And this is not to be confused with our upper level Android build.gradle. Okay, this is the app build.gradle. Scroll all the way to the bottom of this file, and right here at the end of this kind of this last block, which is called dependencies, then Expo core again and Expo Firebase app from the last one. If you don't have those, or if you're just watching this tutorial, go ahead and add Expo core, Expo Firebase app. And then we want to add messaging and instance ID here as well. And these correlate to this part of the instructions, part 2, which just says add messaging. I've already explained why we have instance ID. That's just so we can get the token. All right, so then this part is kind of unique because there's already an implementation of this Android manifest piece in Expo when you eject, and that's for the Expo notification system. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to change the referencing class so that we use Expo Firebase and not the Expo proper. So to do that, let's go to app and then source and then main and Android manifest.xml. So we're going to be in this file. You'll start up here at the top, right? Scroll down until you see this FCM note, or just search for it, FCM, right? There's going to be this comment that says FCM. Let me see if I can backtrack. I can't. But your FCM is not going to have this line of code. Let me see if I can remember what it is. Something like, I don't know. It's going to look something like dot host maybe, dot, and then some Expo class. What you're going to want to do for your service Android name is just replace this with the name of your messaging system. If you're in Android Studio, it'll just auto-suggest this class. If you're not, then it's expo.modules.firebase.messaging.xfirebase messaging service. And now what a messaging service is this is kind of a high-level listener which will subscribe to certain intents, right? So inside of this XML block, we have an intent filter. And in that intent filter, we define the action that we want to listen to. So that action that we want to listen to is called com.google.firebase messaging event. So there's a couple of different kinds of actions that can come through. There's actually a bunch of them. But this is the one that we want this service to subscribe to. So you can also subscribe to like token refreshes or anything else. But for this tutorial, we're just going to be looking at messaging event from Firebase. All right, so now if we actually go and look inside of this code, which you don't need to do this, by the way, I'm just going to try and explain this a little bit better. If you go inside of this X Firebase messaging service, I'm going to hit Command P in VS Code, put the name in, and it will allow me to jump to that file. So you see, this is let me close the sidebar. This is a Firebase messaging service, and it extends Firebase messaging service, right? And we're going to have these different like overrides. So a couple of events can come through. There's, for instance, the on new token event. So if we get a new instance ID token, we can be notified whenever that comes in. Once that comes in, we're going to send a local Java broadcast in a way where our React Native module can actually listen to that and send it to JavaScript. And then the same thing with messages, except it's a little more complex because we're not only listening for data messages, but also for notifications that come through. So we're going to do a little bit of parsing in here. And then if it is a data message, then we want to check to see if we're in the foreground or if we're in the background. And if we're in the background, then we're going to fire up a new headless task, which is a background task in React Native, so that we can parse that data without having to open the application. Let me know if you guys need more explanation on that. I think it's already more than you asked for, so go ahead and save your Android manifest, right? And now there's one more thing that we need to do to get this all set up, and that is we need to go to the main activity in our Java app. So Command P again, and I'm going to go main activity. See, it's right here, not to be confused with the one in the trash. And we're going to scroll down inside of that. We have this Expo packages. Now, this should be here from the last tutorial. If it's not, then you should get something that looks possibly, it'll look like this, right? Like you'll have this line of code. Now we're going to want to replace that with, not this line either, but we have this arrays.package as list, and then we're going to include the different unimodules that we want to be accessible to JavaScript, right? So at this point, we've made our libraries accessible to Android. Now we need to make it so that we can reference them in JavaScript. And if you don't do this step, then you'll get a very detailed error message, which will tell you, hey, these native modules aren't installed natively. Can you go ahead and add them? So if you hit that error, this is probably what you've forgotten to do. See, we just have a bunch of these. We got Firebase app. Notice that we don't need to include Expo core at this point, but we add Firebase app, and then over here at the end, you see we've got new Firebase messaging package and new Firebase instance ID package. We also need to import these libraries at the top. Now, if you do this in Android Studio, you'll probably get those automatically imported, but if you don't, then you'll need to come over here and manually do it. So import expo.modules.firebase.messaging.Firebase messaging package, right? It always starts with Firebase, ends with package. Same with instance ID. Just take a look at that. And again, source code will be in the link description. Will be in a link that you can find in the description. If you have like some syntax error, hopefully that helps you get around it. But again, I really just like this process is the same for any of these modules. Like you see, every single one of these runs the same way. So after a while, you should feel like pretty comfortable with adding extra unimodules to an ejected application. It's not very difficult. I mean, I can do it, and that should be testament enough. So after we have this, let's go ahead and save this file. And now if you were to build this in Android Studio, which I can't do because it'll destroy everything, but if you were to come in here and then hit this green build button, then it'll build to your device. Hopefully there's no errors. You may get a banner over here which will say you need to sync the Gradle, which would look something like, I don't know, let me try and get that message. Okay, it'll look like this. So it'll say files are changed, now you'll need to sync. Hit that sync now button. Everything should go off without a hitch, and that just means that you've edited one of your Gradle files or settings or something. After you've done that, then you can build the product and the project, and then you should be good to go. At that point, you won't need to add any more native code. You can just simply do JS stuff, and it will update and work from that point on. Again, something that we did in the last video is that we make sure that you have the Google services.json inside of your Android project. If you didn't watch the last video, we go and we make sure that we have that from the Firebase console. Make sure that you put that inside of your Android project just so that everything runs. If, for instance, your app builds and it crashes immediately, that means that you don't have the correct Google services.json in your project. So just go ahead and make sure that you've done that. So I'm going to close that down. In fact, I'm going to close it all the way just because I don't want this completely crashing. All right, so I've gone back over to the JavaScript project, right? The Expo project. We've imported Expo Firebase messaging and instance ID, which at this point have been downloaded and they've been linked to our Android project, and that project's been built onto our phone. So now let's get using them, right? To do this, we need to do a few things, right? The first one, obviously, we need to check for the notification permission, and if we don't have it, we need to ask for it. To do that is very simple. Just import permissions from Expo and then check for the notification permission. I'll do that here real quick. We can do this in our component did mount, just make sure it's async. right after our auth state. We don't need to be signed into Firebase to do this. Totally did that way wrong. Permissions from Expo. Ask async. I'm getting nervous. And now we need to check to make sure that the status is granted. And if it's not, then we need to return. We also need to make sure that we spell status right. Kind of coding everything wrong at this point. Okay, so now we've got our permission. We're going to create a listener for data messages. And that's very important because these won't be notifications. At this point, you could go to your Firebase console and send a notification and target your Android apps, and it would come through, but you won't get it with this data message listener that we're about to create, because that is a notification and not a data message. It's a very important distinction that I got lost on the first time I filmed this. So let's create that listener by doing this. We do firebase.messaging to get access to any of the messaging API. And then we're just going to send an alert. We're not going to actually read any of the data. You could console log the message that's coming through and see the available data. There's also a nice type, and you can find that in the documentation. And you can see all your available data, but there will be a lot of data that comes through with it. So, and it's a data message again, so it's very custom to whatever kind of data you want to send. A lot of the times, the reason you would use a data message is, for instance, like say you had some background activity or something, and you wanted to you have some information in your server. You want to tell the client, hey, look, something's happened, do something about it, but we don't really want the user to know about it yet. So that's why you would use a data message. Think of it like Firebase database, but without having to do the subscription. So it's kind of just a very variable or wildcard type data scenario. So at this point, we subscribe to a message. Now what we need to do is get that instance ID. To do that, get token. And we're going to access our instance ID data by doing IID. All right, so once we have this, let's just log it out, because we're going to send this from the terminal again. So we just need to make sure that we know what the data is. We don't need any internal service to know what it is yet. And there's one more thing that we're going to have to do, or at least I hope there's one more thing, and that is we need to save a reference to this listener that we just created so that we can destroy it when the component unmounts. Otherwise, we're going to create a memory leak and eventually our app will crash. So to save that reference, what we're going to do is do something like this dot unsubscribe. Please don't do that. And then we're going to unsubscribe with component will unmount. And just unsubscribe at that point. It sounds weird saying that. And now we won't have any data leaks. So if we go ahead and we run this, just save it. Make sure that your Expo server is running. Something I might have forgotten to tell you, which you may have figured out by this point, is you need that Expo server to be running. So do Expo start and then build the thing onto your device. That will be like self-explanatory, so I don't feel too bad about this being way out of order. But Expo start, build the thing onto your device, and then you'll be able to start seeing the incoming data. So I'm going to go ahead and start that server right now. And we should be able to see it from down here. And at this point, we're going to do everything from the terminal. And in the source code, I've added what that fetch command that we're about to use is. So I'm going to just review that one really quickly. It's down here. What we're doing is a curl command in our terminal. If you don't know what that is, think of it like the fetch API in React Native. If you don't know what that is, think of it just like a post request. I hope you know what that is at least. What this means is that we're going to be sending data upstream to a Google server, and then we're going to say, okay, here's a token and here's some data, send that message. Basically, we're going to be emulating what you might do from a Firebase Cloud function or from another device. And we do this with header, authorization, and key. And to get your key, this is going to be your Firebase server key. So let's look at how to do that one really quickly as well. Go to the console.firebase.com. Wait for that to load up. Never mind. Once you've loaded up and you've gone into your project, what you're going to want to do is come over here, scroll all the way to the top. You'll see this gear. Click on that. Go Project Settings. And then inside of your project settings, come over to Cloud Messaging, this tab. And then there's your server key right there. You can push this copy button. Boom. And now it's copied to your clipboard. Come back over here. And then for your authorization key, you're going to want to paste in your server key. Right there is a long command. And then after that, we're going to set some headers. Now headers tell you what format you want the data to be returned in. In this case, we want the content type application JSON. Once it's JSON, then we can parse it in React Native and JavaScript. Then we're going to say where we're going to send the information. Come on. And we're going to be sending it to .google.com/fcm/send. And then we're going to define some data that we want to be sent in our data message. And we'll do that with -d. And then we have this tokenized object right here with the to value being set to the token that we're about to receive. And after that long token, then you want to define it as message as your other parameter in there. If you define it as a notification, then it will come through as a notification. So create this message field, and then you can add whatever kind of data you want in here. This isn't a very practical way to send data, just because it's a good way to test to make sure everything's working. But normally you would do this from like a Firebase Cloud Function or an AWS Lambda or just any kind of server. So don't worry too much about the semantics of this command. Just make sure that you get those two keys right, the server key and then your instance ID token, just because we want to make sure that the data is coming through and that everything is set up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this command. You see the whole the terminal and everything's running down here. So I'm going to blow that up and then open the app on the device, which again probably isn't going to load very well for you guys, or at least you're not going to see it very well. It should load just fine. The urine message doesn't really matter. Urine. So at this point, you see it will have logged out token. So just go ahead and copy this token value and put it in your curl command. So over here, I'm going to copy the old one, paste in the new one, which looks like it was the same. Now I'm going to copy this whole command. And also, we didn't get prompted about notifications. I assume that's just because I turned it on in another video or something. But you should also see a prompt which says like, this app wants access to your notifications. If you don't, then it means that either the permissions were denied and you should like put in some alert here to like tell people, or you've already given permission. I imagine you've already given permission. If you haven't, then you can check settings, or you could delete the app and reinstall it. Either way, whatever works for you. Just make sure that you get those permissions. You can console log to tell that you got there. But if we see the token, then it means we did get the permission for notifications at this point. It's a long sidetrack. Go ahead, copy this token, or this command. Open up your terminal. I'm going to go ahead and create a new terminal window with Control-Shift-tilde or backtick. And in here, I'm going to paste this command. And you see it kind of ran and it came up, but I'm going to pretend like that didn't just happen. Okay, there's that. And now I'm going to run the command again. Boop. And there it came through immediately. Isn't that awesome? Does it say something? Can you read that? I don't know. But you can see that something happened. And that is that. At this point, you've been able to install Expo, Firebase messaging, and Instance ID. You've gotten the token, you've gotten the permissions, you've tested to make sure everything works, and you've sent a data message. That is all I'm going to cover for this tutorial. Make sure you subscribe so that you can catch the next tutorial where we do the same thing for iOS, which is a much more complex setup, but a lot less explanation, or the same amount. I don't know. We'll find out when I film it. But you don't want to miss it, right? We're going to be setting it up for iOS, and then we're going to be doing notifications after that. At this point, we've already done all the heavy lifting, so you don't even need to wait for that video. If you want to, you can just do yarn add Expo Firebase notifications and just do all the same linking here. You could go to that NPM page and see the instructions there, and you should be able to get going, right? Everything should be like easy going for Android at least. But anyways, thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, make sure to give it a big ol' one of these and share it around if anyone else has like troubles with this. I'll be keeping my eye out on the internet. This is just still tricky because, you know, we're using Android Studio and native code, and that stuff's hard. It's hard for me, so you know, I don't know. But thanks so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you in the next video.